Why, though? Where was the initial spark, the idea? When did you sit down and think, this is it? We're going to shame, we're going to embarrass, we're going to go in there and infiltrate?
Well, the idea actually came from the anti-globalization movement, and quite by accident. In 1999, we couldn't make it to the Seattle protests against the World Trade Organization, and so we did what to us was the next or the third best thing. We set up a fake website making fun of the World Trade Organization, and to our surprise, a lot of people didn't realize we were making fun of it, and we started getting email intended for the World Trade Organization, and finally we got invited to a conference, and we decided to go.
Is that the way in many ways? It's the website first. You create this website, you sit back, you show us in the film, you sit back and you wait for the fish to bite, or the big companies, the big corporations to bite.
Yeah, it's a bit like fishing, though, and sometimes they're not biting, so then you have to get a little bit more aggressive. You know, the stick of dynamite in the water, that kind of the trawl net, the giant net. You know, we started to do things that opened the door a little more aggressively, like pretending to be from a public relations company and writing to a conference and saying, hey, I represent this huge, big-name person who you really want at your conference. And they always want those people. So.
And the hint to listeners, if you do want to do this, you can also just search on Google on speaking opportunities, and you'll get a whole slew of pages that you can just fill out.
And make up your credentials, and just... Is it that easy?
It's that easy. I mean, for those things, you know, they often want you to pay something for the honor of speaking at their conference, but you can do it.
Of course, 2004, you come up with the absolute coup. You wangle your way onto the BBC World Television channel. 300 million viewers, I think.
That's what they said.
All over the globe. And you represent yourself as Dow Chemical and go on screen, live broadcast, and announce a $12 billion compensation package for the victims of Bhopal. Were you nervous at all?
Oh, no, absolutely not. Nerves of steel.
In the film, I think I can detect the shaking. I mean,
that was all acting.
Oh.
I was calm as a cucumber. Yeah. No,
are we allowed to say he was shiting himself? Is that allowed on the radio?
Probably not, but you've done it.
We were being ourselves. I was. I was hideously nervous. Obviously, I was like once in a lifetime opportunity, and I was most nervous that it would fall through, and that somebody at the BBC. One of the many people at the office would notice something wrong, and we got there, of course, and there was only one person, and she was fulfilling many different roles at once, and it was just a relief to be able to start speaking and to start, saying this message that we really wanted the world to hear, which is that Dow could very easily do something about the situation in Bhopal, and here's how easy it would be.
Why did you need to pretend to be them to do that? I mean, why not just demonstrate, protest, call for that? Why did you feel you had to pretend you were actually them?
Well, the culture that we're in respects money. And so if you pretend to be very, very fabulously wealthy and powerful, then people listen to you. It's miraculous. Whereas, if you're a regular individual like us, they're never going to listen. So we've kind of taken these drastic measures to try to get the truth out.
It was quite a drastic measure too, wasn't it? And share price of Dow Chemical plummeted $2 billion in 23 minutes, I think your film says. Shareholders abandoning the company as they realised what they thought you were intending.
We ruined so many grandmothers' retirement accounts. At least some of the press said that. Totally false. It rebounded within 20 minutes. And anyways, of course, these things are tiny sums within enormous seas of capital, but it was $2 billion.
Of course, others said it was a cruel trick to play on the victims of Bhopal.
Right.
Suddenly thought they were getting compensation, only to have it dashed an hour or two later when you were exposed as hoaxes.
Yeah, and strangely, we actually believed that too and felt really bad until we actually talked to the victims who told us that they thought it was great. So that was a big shocker for us. I think, especially in the UK, people maybe they have a lot of information, first of all, about Bhopal, and secondly, we found that a lot of people have a kind of, I don't know if it's a colonial guilt complex or what, but they think that these victims, that they're very easily victimized by a joke, when in fact they're committed activists who have worked for 20 years to try to, pin the blame where it belongs, with Dow.
Yeah, as soon as they understood why we had done it and what the effect in the media was. They were completely overjoyed. And you see that, of course, in the film.
Did you feel guilty, though? Because you say see that in the film.
Well,
at times it feels like you were desperate to get their blessing. It almost... Stage managed is not quite the right word, but it seems you've sought out people who are going to be very enthusiastic about what you did.
Well, once we were in India, of course, we had long known that they were enthusiastic about it. They, in fact, invited us to India. The reality is that we found out about a month after the appearance on the BBC that they were very happy about it, and that all our fears of false hopes were silly.
Did you get any stick? I mean, did anybody say, how dare you?
No.
Nobody?
Nobody.
Nobody in India. None of the so-called victims of our hoaxes have ever given us any stick besides the big corporate ones, the powerful ones.
Yeah, I mean, the victims, and I'm using quote marks, of the hoax, the people who actually believed it for any length of time or at all, who even heard about it, they were people who were actively campaigning to force Dow to do something about Bhopal. They were not the thousands of people in Bhopal who have still not gotten compensation and are waiting for it and are forced to drink the groundwater there. Those people don't have televisions. Those people did not hear the announcement. The people who heard the announcement were the ones who were in the street, who were active campaigners, and they were disappointed that their campaign had not, in fact, succeeded the way they thought it had. But as soon as they understood what it was about, of course, they were overjoyed.
What do you think it achieved by going on?
Liability, and that they are basically, according to even the Indian courts, absconding from justice, because just 2 weeks ago, the courts issued a new warrant of arrest for Warren Anderson, who's the former CEO of Union Carbide, who's now living in Long Island. So this struggle continues, and we just gave it a little bit more presence, especially in the U.S.
Elsewhere in Yes Men Fix the World, the film, you're at conferences, you're addressing industry conferences, business leaders, with quite farcical products. I mean, they're hilarious, but the reaction you get from these people isn't outrage, it's just sort of, some are indifferent, some are actually quite respectful. They come up to you afterwards. You try to convince them that there's a survivor ball suit for disasters, a Halliburton survivor ball, which turns you into something like a character out of the Teletubbies. I mean, it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
But somebody comes up to you afterwards and says, respect, yeah, you know, this sort of appeals to me because I'm trying to market terrorism around the world. And you think, what on earth? I mean, is that what you're trying to engage and get that response, are you?
Well, we're trying to document it if that response exists. I mean, our hope behind all this is that we'll actually spark something in people, and they'll go, oh, I see what you're talking about. This is horrible. How dare Halliburton say this? It's fine, you know, of course they believe we're Halliburton. We've weaseled our way into the conference. But then once Halliburton says, it doesn't matter if everybody dies as long as the extremely wealthy can survive, and here's how, where it's just appalling that they actually go along with this.
Now, in another case, you pose as an Exxon representative announcing a brand new biofuel made out of the victims of climate change. And you hand out candles and they're put on the tables as they eat their lavish lunches, and what it slowly sinks in, what they're burning is a candle made out of supposedly human flesh. Again, not a great reaction though. It's just a little snuffing out of the candle and, oh, it's ruined my soup or my souffle or my canapé. Did that shock you? Did that surprise you?
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, we were relieved there was some reaction. We were hustled off the stage and taken to a holding cell, but it wasn't the kind of reaction that maybe Exxon presenting that sort of a solution to climate change would merit. Yeah.
The thrust of the film seems to be a criticism of blind worship of free market, capitalism, corporate greed. Is that what you set out to do? Has that always been the intention?
Yeah, I think that, I mean, in a lot of ways, you know, the end of the film was also sort of the end of the high-flying years of the free market, you know, and we didn't expect that the end of our film would sort of coincide so well with the ending of that period of capitalism. But you know, in hindsight, we were following that trajectory, and you could feel how strange and propped up the system was. And